Hello and welcome to another installment of the introduction series on model making. The next step I would like to go into is actually modeling this hollow constructed ring that we drew, this one right here. Okay, we're going to go ahead and model this out of a nice thin cardboard. Okay, something that's going to be realistic to our sterling silver metal. This will help us get the structure, understand the feel of this, okay? But before we do that, I'd like to talk about some tools, okay? There's just as many tools for this operation as the drawing portion, all right? I'm going to go through some of mine off the bat here, and then we'll add to it as we go, all right? First off, I'm going to need a pencil, okay? So I got my same trusty pencil. I got various rulers again, okay, straight edges for cutting and measuring, those kind of things. I have a new tool to add to the list. This is a caliper. Okay, this is going to help me determine the thickness, and I'll show you exactly what that means. All right, we have various cutting tools. This is a scalpel blade, okay, extremely sharp, really versatile tool for cutting. And then I have the standard XACTO with a little step back blade with a sharp point on it. I have a SCRIBE tool, which is actually just a really sharp point that's going to help me do some scoring, okay. I have various adhesives, okay. I got a super glue for some quick, strong bonds. And then I got this quick dry craft bond. It's your normal white glue, and this will help us stick the cardboard together. Other various tools I may end up using is a compass. We have a small square to check to make sure we're staying true. Okay. And then I have some various sanding sticks. Okay, cardboard sands really similarly to wood, so it's nice to get a nice finish on this. I can actually use sandpaper. Now these are custom made, just some sandpaper glued onto a stick, nothing fancy. This one's got a little bit of a pad to it so it can get more contours, and this one's rigid. Okay, last but not least, we're going to use some tape, some nice blue tape. This gives us a good stick, but it also it doesn't leave a residue, and it doesn't stick too much. And in order to do cardboard modeling, we need some cardboard, and nothing works quite as well as Lucky Charms. Okay, I find the sugary cereals work much better than that bland stuff. So this is what we will start with. Okay, a couple more things that may help us here. Circle guides, okay, for doing our holes again. It's a lot of similar practice to the first video. Alright, one of the first things we need to do is we need to transfer as much information to our cardboard as we can from our drawing. This drawing has all the information that we need to make this model. Okay, this thing's going to be pretty tiny, all right, so we're going to need to be really precise and careful with our measurements and our cutting, because any little imperfection is going to show up. I'm trying to make this as crisp and tight as I possibly can, all right. So kind of like what we did here, I'm going to transfer my side view first to a piece of cardboard. Okay, what we're going to do for that step is we're actually going to take our piece of cardboard, okay, and we will tape it to our surface. Okay, I'm using just a scrap piece of MDF board as my cutting surface. Typically I would use a self-healing mat, but it kind of reacts, it's green and it reacts to my camera a little weird, so I chose to use this mat here. Okay, so I got this piece of cardboard. The reason why I'm going with this specific type of cardboard, all right, that's something I didn't talk about, but I will now, is the thickness, all right? The thickness of your modeling material needs to be as true to life as the thickness of your final material, as close as you get. That way you understand when two pieces come together, you actually have that material thickness that makes sense, all right? This is a piece of sterling silver, okay? It's a small piece. It won't actually be used for this, but this is going to tell me my thickness, all right? This is what's called 18 gauge silver, okay? That's just the thickness. It's pretty close to around a 32nd of an inch. If you guys can read this caliper, this is set in an imperial format, so I can actually come in and I can squeeze this, and it gives me just a hair over a 32nd of an inch, okay? It's real close. So if I take my scrap piece of cardboard here, I have another piece, okay? I can actually put this caliper right on this, and in certain areas we're at or just a hair under, okay? So in a perfect world this would read exactly 1/32. We're a little bit under, but I think we're going to be pretty close to okay with this. I may have to do some fine-tuning with the metal, but we'll get into that later. All right, so I got my surface tape down. I'm actually going to bring in my trusty T-square again. I'm going to set that on the edge of the board, and I'm going to give myself some reference lines. All right, this we don't have to be as critical with. We can be kind of quicker with this portion. We're just trying to get ourselves some reference points so that we can work. Just throw that on the ground. All right, so we bring our drawing back in. I know from my measurements here, I got roughly an inch, 1 3/16, so I'm going to start building this back in. All right? All I'm doing here is I'm building this exact same drawing on cardboard. So basically I'm transferring all of that information to this piece of cardboard so that it can then be translated into the model. This will essentially be cut out of this cardboard section. My next step here is I need to see if I can actually make this all out of one piece, okay? And what that means is for the cardboard model, this may or may not work with the sterling silver model. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a side, or the face in this, the face. I'm going to make a piece that mimics the side, okay? That's actually going to remain connected. And then we're going to draw this other section against that. So we'll have front, side, and back. Now, this side piece is actually not going to be short like this. It's actually going to be equal to this entire length, okay? And I'll show you how I'm going to draw that here. In order to measure this distance, this round, and this distance to give my full length of that, I could take and I can measure this and roll this around, but it's quite possibly much easier to just take a piece of really bendable wire, come in here, and make that shape, okay? We're going to make that shape as best we can. And this has just got to be close because we're going to actually run that, piece of cardboard a little long. Okay. I'm going to mark it here. That tells me one end and the other. Okay. Let that dry for just a second. Then we can actually straighten this out the best we can. We can come in here. We can take a measurement. All right. It looks like we're almost 3 inches, so I'm going to try to run this a little long. All right. You can't really see this because this is trailing off this page, but I'm going to run this, let's say 3 1/8. All right. So it's down here. I'm going to run it at 3 1/8. Draw that across. Okay, so now we have our front and we actually have our entire side. Now what we're going to do next is we're going to mimic this exact shape right over here on this other side. All right, now that we got our front, our side, and our back done, we can actually start cutting this apart. Okay, now we're going to do a couple tasks before we can really start cutting this apart. My funny little face here. I'm going to use a series of cutting tools to cut certain areas. I'm going to use a series of scoring tools to score a couple areas. What we're looking at right now is actually going to become the inside of the final form. Okay, that does two things. It tells me exactly where I need to score and bend my lines. It lets me kind of make all these pencil lines disappear, so it gives me a little bit nicer final product. All right. The first things we're going to do, we're going to cut the holes out. All right. This is nice while it's locked in place. I'm taking my small X-ACTO knife blade here and I'm just creasing the inside and cutting through the finger holes first. Okay, this is by far one of the most challenging things to cut. I don't really have a good way of cutting perfect circles yet, so I just have to take my time. Be cautious of where your fingers are at all times. Mine are pretty close to this. You're putting a lot of force on these and they could easily slip. All right, as I'm seeing there, I had said earlier that I was going to make this the inside. It actually does not work to do that because this is a cereal box. Right there I just scored those two lines, giving them a crease. Okay, that'll make things fold a lot smoother here in the future. The scalpel in this case works better for longer lines, straighter lines. It follows the ruler really nice. Okay, putting a serious amount of force down on this, so again, you want to make sure that you're not going to slip and cut yourself or wreck your piece. Okay, so just be cautious. These are new blades because these blades really wear out pretty fast. All right, in some cases I just got to go back and just release this a little bit more, so this is a much lighter cut to release this from. Okay, get my nice little elephant structure out of the way. Once the structure is released, I can start thinking of my next step, which is actually starting to fold this into shape. Okay, I can take a straight edge on the now inside, okay, and I can run the back of my X-ACTO or my Scribe along those same lines to fold this in easily. All right, if you crease it well enough, it'll fold by hand. Okay, but you want to be careful. Right here, I'm just taking a little bit of sandpaper to rough up that coating so the glue will stick. Okay, a ruler works good for helping you bend so you don't fold anything incorrectly. Okay, you have to work the cardboard a little bit to get it to shape into where you want. So you kind of massage it, kind of work in that to kind of make that roll over the edge. Before we can move on, I nearly forgot a very crucial piece. Now, this will not be hollow in here, but there actually will be an internal ring that fits inside here. Okay, so I need to actually cut a piece that's exactly the same width as this, because that's going to fit inside. We'll roll that into a circle and that will form our internal ring. So I'll go ahead and do that here quickly. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to use one of my reference lines as a straight edge. So I'm cutting a 3/8 inch wide strip. So it's just a long strip of cardboard that I'll fold out of here. Okay. The next thing I'll do is I'm going to start working this material into a ring shape. Okay. So I'm putting the cardboard on the inside so it's all the same tone. I'm going to form that into a ring. Now in order for me to really understand exactly the right size, this needs to be, I'll actually take my same circle jig and I will set that up. I'll use my small square to make sure the ends of my piece are good and square, and I'll start working that strip into that hole. Okay, there's several different ways of doing this. This is about the quickest way. It's maybe not the most accurate, but that square then again will help me cut that piece off nice and square. Okay, and if you do it correctly, this should fit into that ring with it should be pretty tight. I'm realizing here that I actually cut it just a little bit too short, so I'm going to go through the process really quickly again. Okay, so I'm going to use my old one as a reference, give myself just a little bit more length, cut it off square, and then roll it into that exact same shape to make sure it's good. Okay, we can actually start to glue these together. Let me get some of my crap cleaned out of the way here. All right, what I've gone ahead to do is I've gotten some little tabs of tape ready to go. This will help me, you know, glue everything together properly without having to fumble for tape. I'm actually going to remove this out of the way. Okay, so we got that piece and we got that piece. So those are our two pieces. We got our tape, and I'm actually just going to use some quick dry craft bond here to put this together so we don't have to worry about gluing our fingers together with super glue. Okay, I'm going to put the seam at the top of the ring itself, so I'm actually going to put just a little bead of glue on this. Now this will sand off nice, so I don't have to be super careful with this. I actually may put some down here. My trusty multi-tool. I'm going to put some on the edge of this here. Let's make sure you guys can see that. Okay. Now, this is where it gets tricky. I do not have tiny hands. I mean, they're not that big, but they're not that tiny either. So getting this to form and stay is kind of a hat trick. We may actually use just a dab of super glue at the top to help us get started. Okay. This is why it's important to have kind of a little bit of everything in your bag of tricks. I'm just going to let that kind of tack up a little bit. Okay, we'll take a little tiny piece of blue tape here, not blue foam. And tag that in on the inside. And I've successfully gotten super glue on my fingers, so that's swell. Okay, to make this easier, I'm actually going to roll this into a ring. Roll this into a ring. Like I said, this is not the easiest of things. It looks like I've totally miffed it. So we're gonna reassess. Okay, so this is in a ring shape, but it's not in the piece yet. So we kind of failed our first attempt. That's okay. We're gonna keep kind of forming this to round. We're gonna get it close, okay? I'm actually gonna use just straight super glue on this since our other glue kind of failed. Okay. What I'll probably do is I'll do a little bit at a time, kind of work it around. Now I'm aiming for flush on the inside. Pretty close to. Okay. These are never going to be super perfect. You know, it takes practice. And I'm appearing to be kind of out of practice right now. Just working some glue in on that edge. Kind of examining both sides. I'll put a little bit more on. As we continue to glue this, you'll end up fighting with this a little bit. So the cardboard's flexible, it wants to move, you kind of got to figure out the trick of holding it and gluing it to remain in the right spot. You know, using some patience. I've actually brought in another tool, a dental tool here that I can kind of scrape and push, force glue into some areas. The super glue itself dries really, really hard, and it's not all that great to sand. But if I use more of this white glue to kind of fill some voids, to glue things together, that actually, it sands really nicely, it melds in, it dries clear, so that's really nice. So I'll kind of hold these two pieces together. I still use a little super glue to help as a clamp on the inside, but it's coming together, okay? It just takes a little finesse. And as this stuff is drying, you can actually keep pushing and pulling it around, all right? Larger scale objects, I probably would use a little bit more tape, okay? A little bit more clamping, something like that. But with this, since it's so small, it's really difficult to tape anything in place. So we just have to rely on patience and kind of pushing things around. Here I'm using some more of that craft glue, and I'm just filling some voids on either side, giving me just a little bit of area to manipulate this, to get it to stick in, to fill that area perfectly. Okay. Fingers work really good for smearing that out. This is all water-based adhesive, so you don't really have to worry about it. It just peels right off. The inside I can smear a little glue in here and push everything together, making sure that that seam is nice and tight. Okay, I'm continually working this. I'm trying to use tape, but tape isn't really sticking very well, so you just have to be patient, and it's really quite tricky. I'm the same way. Okay, a little super glue on the inside can help kind of speed things up a little bit. I will continue to add just a little bit more adhesive to fill any of these voids, to push the pieces together, to massage them into position. Okay? Cardboard is not always the easiest medium to work with. There is some patience and some tricks you got to use. You got to be able to be patient. The inner perfectionist in me wanted to start over at this point, but I knew I could keep pushing and keep massaging this thing into a workable, nice object. Right here, I'm just trimming that little excess off, making sure that everything is nice and flush, and we're starting to get to the point where we can start tuning this up with a little bit of sandpaper. All right, this is getting pretty close to being ready to start sanding. I'm going to go with a nice 320. I even have some 220 here that I can just really lightly start working these surfaces. Okay, now I don't want to abuse the hell out of this. I just want to start, you know, tuning it up a little bit. I don't want to negate all the work I just did to it. Okay, and I also want to remember that I'm kind of rushing this glue here, so I'm not going as aggressive as I could be. Okay. this is doing is this is smoothing the areas, tuning some things up, showing me if there's any parts or pieces that maybe need another dab of glue or two. That's probably plenty. All right. So we have reached the point where I need to just let this dry until tomorrow. After giving this ring some time to dry overnight, it's good and solid, and now I can start addressing some of the lumps and bumps. So I'm just taking some 220 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to flatten each face, okay, so the front and back face, and then I'll start to address some of the bottom of the curve where that cardboard actually started to fold more than it started to curve. All right. Some things to remember when you're sanding: make sure you're pushing the material in rather than pulling it. You don't want to tear this thing apart as you're sanding it. Some smaller sanding sticks work good for getting some of the polish. Okay, I can hold this ring and I can start to work out some of those lumps. The great thing about this process is we're going to be using a lot of these exact same motions and methods to actually make the final ring. Okay, put a little pencil on there just to show my highs and lows. Okay, so that tells me how far I need to go yet. All right, these are just little handmade sanding sticks. The one I'm using currently is got a little softness to it, so it can contour a little bit better. The other one is a combination 400 grit, 320 grit that can easily help shape everything into place. Lines off of this, but it was gonna look a lot better if I do. You could go as far as painting this to make it look as appearance great as you want, but it's not that critical. Okay, the most critical thing here is that it has some sort of fit and finish. Okay, it has some sort of shape and size that is exactly where we want it to be. Okay, nice little pinky ring that's now stuck. Okay, I have some other sanding tools and even a file. Okay, so this is a real fine file that I can actually come in here using this radius edge here, and I can soften this inside. Okay, now this is cardboard, it's not super thick, so I don't want to go too crazy on it, but we can dress it up a little bit. Okay, you want to be careful you don't end up peeling off too many layers, but we can come back in and coat. We're going to coat this with a little bit more glue anyway. Let's see what we got. Okay, you guys can see now we got a nice three-dimensional form here. It's by no means perfect, but you know, that's okay. And we'll probably spend way too much time dressing this in, you know, and second guessing, well, if I would have done this a little bit different, or I would have done that a little bit different, it would have came out a little cleaner and I wouldn't have to spend so much time fixing, you know. And that's all the learning process of doing new things. Okay, I've never made this object before, so the first time is always the most challenging. It does get easier as you go. We can clean up some of this internal glue here. Okay, I will go ahead and I'll pack this with a little bit of fiber just so it gives us a sense of what this thing is going to actually look like. Okay. I do have other sanding sticks, kind of smaller. You can use emery boards for like nail files and stuff like that. Work great for models. You know, anything and everything that you can imagine. I could take a piece of dowel or a round piece of wood and wrap some sandpaper on it to to dress that in. What we don't want to do is this, where we're actually going backwards. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to have to decide it is what it is. Okay? We don't want to make it any worse trying to make it better, if that makes sense. Okay? I'm going to tune up this internal here just a little bit more, just a little glue there. Little contour filing. All right, there we have it. Good enough. Okay, a nice model. It'll actually fit on a finger. Okay, it gives me an understanding of what this gap is. All right, I can give it to my client and they can try it on to see. My guess is, just looking at this now in physical shape, that this is far too big. Okay, the intention was this was going to be around a 1/16 of an inch, and it's more like an 1/8 of an inch. So the great thing about having this physical model now is I can make those adjustments when it comes to the final form. All right, without actually feeling this in my hand or putting it on my finger and seeing, you know, how uncomfortable this could be put together. Okay, I would never understand that. All right, so a simple model put together, sanded quickly, tells me a huge amount about what this object actually has potential to be. And there you have it.